When Sherlock Holmes walks into a room, the mystery immediately becomes solved. When he sees you, he would tell you your profession, your mood, your last destination, and whether you'd recently been in financial trouble, before you even said a word. You'd think he was magic, but Holmes wasn't magic. He just had a method, and that method required tools. Today we're doing a full breakdown of those tools that helped Holmes succeed. They made up his everyday carry, and by the end of this video, you'd be as sophisticated as Holmes was. It's elementary, dear audience. The last item on this list is the one nobody puts in the same sentence as detective work. It should be first. Let's get into it. The lens he actually used. In A Study in Scarlet, the very first Holmes story, published in 1887, Watson describes him whipping out a large, round magnifying glass to examine footprints at a crime scene. He drops to his knees, he measures, he observes things invisible to everyone else in the room. The lens is the first tool the reader ever sees him use, and it's not a coincidence. Conan Doyle put it there first because it is, in the most literal sense, the instrument of Holmes's method. The specific lens matters. Holmes carried what was known as a large convex lens, not a jeweler's loupe, not a small pocket glass, but a substantial handheld magnifier capable of producing meaningful magnification across a wide field of view. The convex design bends light toward a focal point, which means the further details visible through it depend entirely on knowing the correct distance to hold it from the subject. Holmes knew this intuitively. You see the description of him dropping to the floor, holding the glass at precise distances from footprints, from soil samples, from threads of fabric, from ash, always adjusting, always calibrating, always reading the world at a resolution nobody around him could access. What he was doing, mechanically, was expanding his perceptual range. The unaided eye has a fixed resolution at any given distance. The lens extends it. It doesn't make him smarter than Watson. It gives his intelligence something more to work with. That distinction is essential to understanding Holmes's entire approach. He wasn't guessing. He was observing at a level of detail that made his conclusions feel like deductions, but were actually the logical result of having better data than everyone else in the room. In the Boscombe Valley mystery, he uses the lens to examine a stone, a piece of grass, a clod of earth, and a stick. 4 objects that together reconstruct the physical mechanics of a crime that the local police had completely misread. He sees what they missed, not because he is more clever in the abstract, but because he looked more carefully at smaller things. That's the lens's real lesson, not the magnification. The commitment to looking closely at things others dismiss as too small to matter. A modern equivalent worth carrying, the Bausch and Lomb Coddington magnifier, a solid single-element loupe producing 20x magnification in a compact, pocketable form that Holmes would have appreciated for field work. For the desk and the detail work, a quality Eschenbach stand magnifier with LED illumination. The principle is unchanged. Extend your perceptual range. Look at what other people walk past. The lens sees the world. The notebook holds it. The notebook he actually kept. Holmes is described across multiple stories consulting his pocketbook, a small, personal notebook he carried in his jacket and referenced with the speed of someone who had built a filing system precise enough to retrieve any specific fact in seconds. This wasn't a journal. It wasn't a to-do list. It was an indexed, cross-referenced external memory, a physical database of everything his mind had collected and decided was worth keeping. The scope of what it contained is staggering when you start pulling examples from the stories. In A Study in Scarlet, Watson learns that Holmes has cataloged 140 distinct varieties of tobacco ash and can identify any of them on sight. In The Sign of the Four, Holmes references specific chemical analyses he has conducted and indexed. Across the later stories, he draws on detailed knowledge of criminal histories, typefaces, soil compositions from different parts of England, the handwriting of over 100 individuals, tattoo patterns from specific ports, and the title schedules of the Thames at different times of year. None of this lives in the pocket notebook alone. Back at 221B Baker Street, Holmes maintained what he called his commonplace books, large indexed volumes of newspaper clippings, personal observations, correspondence extracts, and cross-reference data that functioned as his permanent archive. The pocket notebook was the field interface, where observations got captured in the moment, fast, before the detail faded. The commonplace books were the database those observations eventually fed. The relationship between the two is the interesting part. Most people who take notes don't have a system for what happens to the notes afterward. They capture things, and then the capture goes nowhere. A graveyard of observations that never connect to anything. Holmes's system was built so that every field observation eventually found its place in the larger archive, where it could be cross-referenced against everything else he knew. A new detail about a criminal's handwriting didn't just sit in the pocket notebook. It got indexed against every other handwriting note, every other criminal file, until the new piece and the old pieces formed a picture. That's a different relationship with information than most people have. And it started with the discipline of writing things down in the field, immediately, before the moment passed. In The Adventure of the Bruce Partington Plans, Holmes retrieves a specific piece of information about a man named Oberstein from memory so quickly that Watson can't quite track how he got there, and then Holmes walks to the shelves and pulls the relevant commonplace book entry to confirm it. The retrieval from memory and the retrieval from the book happen in the same motion, as if the two storage systems are so thoroughly integrated that the distinction between them has essentially collapsed. That integration is the result of a specific practice: capturing in the field, filing when you return, and indexing everything so that retrieval is fast enough to be useful. Most people who take notes never build that integration. The capture happens, the filing doesn't. The index never gets built. And so the notes accumulate without ever becoming searchable, a record of things observed that contributes nothing to the next observation. Holmes's system worked because every step of it was maintained with the same discipline he applied to everything else. Modern equivalent to what Sherlock's notebook is a field notes memo book for the pocket, the original 3-pack, graph paper, 48 pages, small enough to disappear into a breast pocket, but substantial enough to hold a day's worth of observation. For the commonplace book function, Notion or Obsidian on the digital side, or a Leuchtturm 1917F5 with a proper index for the analog purist. The system is more important than the specific tool. Build the connection between what you capture in the field and where it lives permanently. The next item is where most people get it wrong: the pipe he actually smoked. Holmes didn't smoke a pipe, he smoked pipes, and the choice wasn't aesthetic, it was functional in the same way the lens in the notebook were. Each pipe served a different cognitive purpose, and Holmes was explicit about this in ways that Conan Doyle scattered across the stories for attentive readers to collect. The cherrywood pipe appears in moments of agitation, in high-energy states, cases that were moving fast. The clay pipe shows up during sustained, concentrated thinking that needed to be done without interruption. In The Copper Beeches, Watson describes arriving at Baker Street to find Holmes in a blue haze, deep in a case, unreachable for conversation. The clay pipe was on, which meant he had gone somewhere. Watson couldn't follow and didn't try to. The briar, the most common of his pipes in the stories, was his standard carry, the default instrument for the periods between active cases when his mind was processing without a specific problem to solve. In The Red-Headed League, Holmes tells Watson that the problem before them is a 3-pipe problem, meaning it requires the sustained concentration of 3 bowls of tobacco before he will be ready to speak. This is not theater. This is a man who understands his own cognitive process with enough precision to quantify how much processing time a given problem requires and what substance he needs to maintain that processing. The pipe wasn't a prop or an affectation, it was a tool for managing the quality of his thinking across different mental states. Watson, who was a doctor, was well aware of what the tobacco was doing to Holmes's lungs and said so. Holmes's response across multiple stories was essentially, "The cost is worth the function." He wasn't wrong, and he wasn't careless. He'd made a deliberate trade. The 3-pipe problem line from The Red-Headed League is one of the most quoted things Holmes ever said, and it's almost always quoted as color as a charming Victorian eccentricity. What it actually is a precise statement about cognitive resource management. Holmes is telling Watson, this problem is complex enough that I need sustained concentration across 3 extended periods of focused processing before my conclusions will be reliable enough to speak. He's not being dramatic. He's being accurate about his own mind's requirements. That level of self-knowledge is rarer than it sounds. Most people don't know how long a given type of problem actually takes them to think through. They either rush to a conclusion before the thinking is done, or they keep thinking long past the point where the thinking has stopped being useful. Holmes knew the difference. He knew when he was ready and when he wasn't, and he built the pipe ritual around the honesty of that knowledge rather than the performance of it. The modern equivalent for the ritual itself is personal and varies. The principle, though, is worth taking seriously. Do you know which conditions produce your best thinking? Do you know when you need a 3-pipe problem's worth of time before you're ready to speak? Holmes did. That self-knowledge was part of the method. The lens and the notebook handle 90% of Holmes's work. The revolver handles the other 10, and that 10% tends to be the kind that gets people killed. The revolver he actually carried. Holmes carried a handgun. The specific model is never explicitly named in the Conan Doyle stories, which is a deliberate authorial choice. Conan Doyle was writing for a general audience, not a firearms manual. But the contextual evidence in the stories, combined with what was standard for a civilian gentleman of means in late Victorian London, points clearly to something in the Webley British Bulldog family. a compact, heavy-caliber pocket revolver chambered in .44 or .45, designed for close-quarters self-defense rather than target shooting. Short barrel, large bore, reliable in the conditions where you'd actually need it. Watson, who was an army man, a veteran of the Second Afghan War, wounded at the Battle of Maiwand, also carried, and between the two of them, they covered situations that the official police either wouldn't or couldn't. Holmes was not a man who called for backup and waited. He walked into the problem, and he was armed when he did it. The moment in the adventure of the Speckled Band makes this clear. Holmes knows something is coming in the dark. Something that has already killed once, and he sits in that room in the small hours with Watson, both of them armed, waiting. He is not afraid. He has calculated the risk and made his peace with it. The revolver is in his hand because he has assessed the situation correctly, and the situation requires it. There's a version of carrying a weapon that's performative. Holmes's version was purely functional. He carried because there were situations in his professional life where not carrying would have been irrational. He didn't discuss it, didn't reference it unnecessarily, and put it away the moment the situation no longer required it. Modern equivalent: for the philosophy rather than the specific firearm, the principle is the same as every other item in Holmes's kit. Carry what the situation actually requires, nothing more and nothing less. For those in jurisdictions where it's legal and appropriate, a quality compact revolver in the tradition of the Bulldog, the Smith & Wesson 442, or the Ruger LCR carries that same logic. Reliable, simple, nothing decorative, built for the situation you hope never happens. This next item gets overlooked. It shouldn't. The knife he actually carried. In The Adventure of the Abbey Grange, Conan Doyle mentions that Holmes carries a multiplex knife, specifically described as containing a corkscrew and various blades. This is a Sheffield multiplex, a Victorian-era folding multi-tool produced by the Sheffield cutlery industry that had been the center of British blade making for centuries. The Sheffield multiplex wasn't a gentleman's novelty. It was a working tool, compact, well-made, capable of handling a range of tasks that a single fixed blade couldn't. The corkscrew detail is interesting because it places Holmes in the category of men who expected to need to open things and prepared accordingly. But the blades are the working end. At a crime scene, a blade serves functions the magnifying lens can't. Cutting through cord, opening packages, clearing debris from a surface he needs to examine, taking a sample of something without disturbing the surrounding evidence. The knife is the lens's partner, the observation tool paired with the physical tool. What the Sheffield multiplex tells you about Holmes as a carrier is the same thing every other item tells you. He thought through what he might need and carried the minimum version of it, not a full toolkit, not a single-purpose blade. A compact, capable instrument that covered the range of physical tasks his work required. Nothing on that knife that didn't earn its edge. The modern equivalent of this carry is the Swiss Army knife Tinker or Victorinox Alox Pioneer. The same philosophy in current production, nothing decorative, every tool justified. Or the Leatherman Wave Plus, if you want more capability in the same spirit. Sheffield cutlery is still being made. William Whiteley and Iberson both carry on the tradition for those who want the direct lineage. Night changes everything about an investigation, but Sherlock is always prepared. The lantern he actually carried. Evidence that's visible in daylight becomes invisible after dark. Witnesses who are cooperative during the day become unavailable. And the people you're investigating, if they're the kind of people Holmes typically investigated, use the dark deliberately as cover for the things they don't want seen. Holmes worked at night regularly, and he carried the right equipment for it. His night tool was the dark lantern, a portable oil lamp enclosed in a metal housing with a sliding shutter on one side. Open the shutter and it projects a controlled beam of light in a specific direction. Slide it shut and the lantern goes dark instantly, with the flame still burning inside, ready to reopen without the delay of relighting. It was the Victorian equivalent of a tactical flashlight. Directional, controllable, capable of stealth in a way that an open flame or a standard lantern wasn't. Watson describes it directly in The Adventure of the Bruce Partington Plans. Holmes producing the dark lantern during a night operation on a rooftop, controlling exactly where the light fell, extinguishing it the moment he heard movement. The shutter gave him the ability to move through dark spaces and expose only what he needed to see at the moment he needed to see it. Everything else stayed dark. The dark lantern is the item on this list that most directly reveals Holmes as a man who thought operationally. He didn't just consider what he needed to observe. He considered the conditions under which he'd be observing and what equipment those conditions required, day kit and night kit. Not because he was paranoid, but because he was accurate. Modern equivalent, the Streamlight ProTac 2LX or the Surefire EDC L1T both compact, both capable of projecting a focused beam, both engineered around the same principle as the dark lantern. Controlled illumination in spaces where light discipline matters. Carry it in a jacket pocket. You'll use it more than you expect. This is the item that surprises people. It shouldn't. The tape measure he actually carried. In a study in Scarlet, Watson watches Holmes crawling along the floor of a murder scene, tape measure in hand, measuring distances with a focus that looked like obsessive behavior bordering on the theatrical. It wasn't theatrical. It was geometry. Holmes understood something that the police investigators around him consistently missed. A crime scene is a physical record of a physical event, and physical events have geometry. The stride length of a person moving at pace tells you their height, their build, their approximate weight distribution, their emotional state at the time of movement. The distance between a body and a fixed object tells you something about how the body fell, which tells you something about where the blow came from, which tells you something about the height and angle of the person who delivered it. These aren't guesses, they're measurements, and measurements require an instrument. The tape measure was that instrument. Holmes carried it because he had already understood, before arriving at any scene, that the information he needed was going to be encoded in distances and proportions that his eye alone couldn't quantify. The measurement was built into the method before the method encountered a specific case. Across multiple stories, this geometrical precision produces results that look miraculous to everyone watching, but are, on close examination, the straightforward results of taking measurements that nobody else bothered to take. In the Musgrave ritual, an entire treasure is located through a chain of geometrical calculations derived from an old riddle. Holmes paces distances, measures shadows, accounts for the declination of the sun at a specific time of year, and arrives at the precise location of something buried centuries earlier. The tape measure is how that kind of reasoning becomes actionable. The habit goes deeper than the tape measure itself. Holmes applies the same geometry of attention to time, to behavior, to the sequence of events at a scene. In a study in Scarlet, he estimates the time of death not from the temperature of the body alone, but from the combined geometry of the rigor, the lividity, the condition of the blood on the floor, and the temperature of the room. Each measurement cross-checks the others. No single reading is trusted in isolation. The tape measure is the physical expression of an approach to evidence that insists on precision at every step. Modern equivalent, a Stanley Fatmax 5M tape for fieldwork. Compact, durable, reliable. For distance measurement at scale, a Leica Disto laser measure covers the same function with greater precision and range. The tool is secondary. The habit of measuring things rather than estimating them, that's the Holmes principle. Stop guessing dimensions. Measure them. The answer is usually different from what you assumed. Holmes was an actor. He just never appeared on a stage. The disguise kit he actually carried. Across the Conan Doyle stories, Holmes disappears into disguise so completely that Watson, who lived with him, who knew his face, his voice, his posture, his walk, failed to recognize him multiple times. In A Scandal in Bohemia, Holmes dresses as an amiable groom and stands outside Baker Street long enough to exchange words with Watson without Watson having any idea. In The Adventure of the Final Problem, he appears as an elderly Italian priest. In The Adventure of the Empty House, he materializes as an aged bookseller who gets close enough to Watson to hand him a stack of books before Watson realizes the bookseller is Holmes and nearly faints. These weren't costumes assembled from a theater wardrobe. They were field disguises, constructed from items Holmes carried or could assemble quickly. Watson references in A Scandal in Bohemia that Holmes kept theatrical wigs, spirit gum, makeup materials, and a range of clothing appropriate to different social classes. The spirit gum was for affixing false hair and altering the apparent lines of the face. The makeup adjusted the apparent age and complexion. The clothing established the social class and occupation being performed. A working groom reads entirely differently from an elderly gentleman, and both are different from a clergyman, and Holmes could produce any of them on short notice. What made the disguises work wasn't the materials, it was the performance behind the materials. Holmes was a precise observer of human behavior, which meant he understood exactly what physical and behavioral signals each type of person projects. A groom moves differently from a gentleman. An elderly man holds his shoulders differently, adjusts his pace, distributes his weight differently when he walks. Holmes didn't just change his face, he changed his body. And the disguise kit was the physical support system for a performance that began in the observation and ended in the walk. The disguise kit raises a question the other items don't. What does it mean to carry the tools for becoming someone else? Every other item in Holmes's kit extends his existing capabilities. The lens extends his sight, the notebook extends his memory, the revolver extends his reach in a dangerous situation. The disguise kit does something fundamentally different. It allows him to subtract himself from the equation entirely. To walk through a scene as an invisible observer rather than the famous detective whose presence would immediately alter what he was trying to observe. That's a sophisticated understanding of how investigation actually works. The moment people know they're being watched by Sherlock Holmes, they behave differently. The disguise solves that problem by removing Holmes from the visible equation while keeping his mind fully engaged. The materials are secondary to the concept. Sometimes the best tool for observation is not being observed yourself. For a modern equivalent, a quality character actor's makeup kit is still built around the same basic materials: spirit gum, makeup sponges, crepe wool for facial hair, a range of foundation and contouring. The theatrical supply houses that serve the Victorian stage are gone, but Ben Nye and Maron both produce professional-grade stage makeup still in use for exactly this kind of character transformation. The deeper skill, studying how different types of people move and hold themselves, that's free. It just requires the same quality of attention Holmes applied to everything else. Last, because this is the item that unlocks the man behind the method: the violin he actually played. Holmes played the violin, not occasionally, not as a social accomplishment, not to impress guests. He played it at 2 in the morning when he couldn't sleep. He played it between cases when the absence of a problem made him restless and difficult to live with. He played it when he was working through something. Not consciously working, not reasoning step by step, but letting a part of his mind process in the background while the music occupied the foreground. Watson describes it directly in A Study in Scarlet, and the description is memorable. Holmes would sit in his chair, eyes closed, bow scraping across the strings for hours, sometimes producing fragments of recognized compositions, sometimes producing something that sounded like nothing Watson had ever heard, original, strange, private. Watson tolerated it, sometimes complained about it, never quite understood it. Which is exactly the point. The violin wasn't for Watson. It wasn't for anyone in the room. It was for Holmes. His instrument was a Stradivarius. Specifically, he references having purchased it for 55 shillings from a Jewish broker in Tottenham Court Road, which would be extraordinarily cheap for an authentic Stradivarius even in the 1880s. And whether the instrument was genuinely what Holmes claimed it was belongs to the considerable body of Holmes scholarship that has consumed serious people for over 100 years. What's certain is that the violin mattered to him in a way that's different from how any other item on this list mattered. The lens was a tool for seeing. The notebook was a tool for remembering. The pipe was a tool for thinking. The violin was a tool for being, for accessing something in himself that the relentless logic of his professional life didn't reach. Holmes was not a comfortable person. He was brilliant, difficult, prone to long depressions between cases, capable of cruelty in the casual observations he made about people, and fundamentally isolated in the way that extreme intelligence often isolates. The violin was the one place where the method was off, where he wasn't deducing anything, where he was, as far as the stories allow us to see, simply present in something that moved him. In The Adventure of the Red-Headed League, after resolving the case, Holmes suggests he and Watson go to hear Sarasate play at St. James's Hall. He talks about the music the way he rarely talks about anything else, with uncomplicated enthusiasm, without analysis, without the armor of detachment. The violin gave him access to something the work couldn't. For a man whose mind ran at the speed and temperature that Holmes did, that access wasn't a luxury. It was structural. The modern equivalent is whatever the thing is for you that asks nothing of your professional self, not the thing you're good at in the way you're good at your work. The thing that operates differently. Holmes's violin was not something he deployed. It was something he surrendered to. Find yours. What Sherlock Holmes's everyday carry tells you, taken together, is a portrait of a specific kind of mind, and the tools that mind required to do its work. The lens, because the world contains more information than the unaided eye can access. The notebook, because observations are worthless if they don't accumulate into something. The pipe, because thinking is a physical process and the body needs managing as much as the mind does. The revolver, because some situations require direct preparation for direct danger. The knife, because physical work requires physical tools. The dark lantern, because conditions change and your equipment needs to change with them. The tape measure, because measurement beats estimation every single time. The disguise kit, because sometimes the investigation requires the investigator to disappear. And the violin, because a mind that never stops working eventually stops working, and the thing that saved Holmes from himself, repeatedly, was the one item in his carry that asked him to stop being a detective for a few hours and simply be a man. None of this is mythology. It's all in the text. Conan Doyle built the kit story by story across 40 years of Holmes, and what emerges, when you look at it carefully, is a man who thought as hard about his tools as he thought about everything else. That's the real lesson of the Holmes carry, not the items. the intention behind them. Product links and modern equivalents for everything we covered today are in the pinned comment and the video description. Go check those out. So, which one is your favorite EDC? Let me know in the comments. Like this video and subscribe.